Everybody, thank you for joining. I really appreciate you being here today. So the webinar is about going beyond the basics, creating a culture and behaviors to support continuous improvement in infrastructure. And, you know, we really feel like that there's two structured patterns of behavior that we can help you implement that will create that kind of culture. And those two patterns of behavior, if you will, or two structured skill sets are come through Toyota Kata and training with industry. Okay. Now, the real question is, how do we define culture? What does that mean? Um, Historically, what do you think culture meant, right? And I know you guys are on mute. You can't answer that, so it's a rhetorical question. But I've answered this question. I spent some time with Oscar Roach, and some of the material from this PowerPoint, I've leaned on him a little, so I want to give him a shout out and a little bit of credit. But what he told me culture is defined as it's the sum of people's habits as they go about their daily work. Okay, now if we logically think about this and we say, well, if we want to change culture, what does that mean? Well, then that means we need to change people's habits, right? If culture is the sum of their habits as they go about their daily work, then we need to change what it is that they do habitually in order to change our culture. Okay. So if we want to improve culture, we need to start coaching different habits. Historically, when we think about continuous improvement, right? What are we typically doing? Most organizations are probably using lean in some way, shape, or form, and they're using lean to eliminate the 8 waste. Right here, we use the acronym downtime, and they eliminate the waste in an effort to maximize customer value. And I don't think there's anything wrong with lean. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it that way. But what I think that was discovered over time is when we detect, for not no pun, no rhyme intended, but when we detect a defect, right, that is a firefighting mechanism. The defect has already happened, and now we're figuring out a way to eliminate it, and we're figuring out a way to not let it happen again. And I think what Toyota found out through time, energy, and effort was, hey, that's great. We do want to eliminate waste. We do want to maximize customer value, but we think the best way to do it is to be proactive through people development, the development of our people internally. And if we do that and we create that improvement culture by developing our people and making and turning them into problem solvers, then we're much more proactive in the elimination of waste because we make sure those wastes don't happen on the front end versus addressing them on the back end. And I think that is a very is a watershed moment for a lot of organizations that I've worked with, especially those that practice, lean or have Six Sigma champions. And when they realize that the people that do the work every day are the experts, and if I can teach them how to solve problems scientifically, if I can give them the skill set that they need to make the work that they do at their work environment or at the Gemba where they are more effective and less wasteful and more value added, then I'm creating a much better organization. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how do we go about doing that? Well, there's a couple of different things that you can do. And one is what we call training within industry. And we'll go into a little bit of the history of it. But some of the benefits from training within industry are, you know, we can train people to do a task or a job faster. We can, when we train everybody the same way, we are creating a standard work environment of everyone's doing it this way. And we're able to sustain that standard work because everyone was given the same set of instructions on how to do a particular task. And when we do that, we reduce errors, we increase quality, we are speeding up the flow. So all of those things that you think about historically from a lean perspective, flow, defects, add value. We're doing that, but we're doing it through a different mechanism and a different set of skills. So TWI is teaching the fundamental skills. Kata is teaching the fundamental skills that then go on to make those other lean tools, Kanban, Poka-yoke, whatever they may be, easier to learn, easier to implement, and easier to sustain because you understand the basic premise behind why those things were created. You understand the basic skill sets of problem solving and getting to the facts and those types of things. So historically, TWI was created during World War II to train replacements of the male workforce who obviously left to go fight the war. And you guys have all seen the Rosie the Riveter posters flexing her muscle. And, you know, we had to train Rosie how to put together those airplanes quickly. Rosie did not have the benefit of 17 years of experience and of learning over the job. We had to provide rapid training and learn how to build those things rapidly. And it's recognized as part of what helped the Allied forces actually boost industrial production so that we were outproduced the Germans and the Japanese, and we were able to win the war because of that. So it has a very storied history, and it is proven through time, you know, going on 80 years now, to be a very effective mechanism for implementing the type of skills that we'd like to see our workforce have, so that we have the type of behaviors and the type of habits that we want to see instilled in our workforce, so that we arrive at the type of culture that we like to have. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just now noticed the chat. Yeah. So let me move that over here where I can see it a little better if something else pops up. Yes, training within industry, TWI. So I want to talk about the 3 modules of training within industry, and what they are, what they consist of, and how they work cohesively together, for lack of a better word. But TWI, it consists of 3 basic tools, okay? And those 3 basic tools, or those 3 basic skills, are job instruction, right? Where we're teaching somebody quickly how to do a job correctly, safely, and conscientiously. And then there's job relations, where we're teaching how to build positive employee relations. And we do that for one simple reason. That's to increase cooperation from our workforce, but also to increase motivation of our workforce. You know, I say often that, you know, there's only 2 reasons people leave jobs, and it's rarely money. The first is they don't feel valued in whatever it is that they're doing. And the second is they don't really like their supervisor. And the reason they don't like their supervisor is because they don't feel valued, or their supervisor doesn't make them feel valued. And so job relations helps us on that front. And then the third leg of that stool is job methods, where we're teaching ways to improve the way jobs are done. Now, historically, a lot of lean and a lot of Six Sigma and a lot of those things have fallen into the job methods category. And it really follows a lot of the same steps, but it teaches the fundamentals of how to go about doing that. Not just throw a tool at it, not just throw a value stream, not just throw Kaizen, not just throw Kanban, TPM, whatever it may be. But the reasons and the thought process behind why you should choose that particular tool. Okay. Now, as I said, they make a nice, neat little stool here. You know, the 3 TWI programs work together like a 3-legged stool. And if we take one of those away, then obviously the stool's going to fall down. Now, the thing that this slide doesn't represent is a stool only works when there's a seat, right? Something that holds those 3 legs together. And for me, this is that skill set of scientific thinking, or that improvement kata, the Toyota kata. And so good cooperation, right? So job relations, that's vital to motivate workers to learn how to do the job appropriately or effectively, or quickly or conscientiously. And that's that. So JR is crucial to JI, and they all fit together. If I don't trust my supervisor, if I don't have good job relations with my supervisor, I'm never going to tell them how to a better way to do the job, right? Or another job method approach. But you know, if we do, and we do have that good relationship, and we do come up with a new methodology for a new process, so we are improving through job methods, then we have to teach others the new way to do it, and that's job instruction. And you can kind of see it's a never-ending cycle of using these three tools to improve or continuously improve our processes and our outputs with an idea or a mindset of adding value. And again, going back and eliminating those 8 wastes that we learn about in Lean. So with the 3 skill sets from training within industry, and I like to add that 4th one, right? The seat of the stool being that kind of skill of scientific thinking and problem solving. Um, what are we really addressing? Well, when it comes to the skill of job instruction, if we have employees that don't know how to appropriately do the job, then we teach them the skill of job instruction. Now, maybe we have a process where employees don't care or they don't want to do it that way. They want to do it their own way. And that's where we teach the skill of job relations. And then we think about a task being too physical or maybe too difficult to do the way as constructed. Or maybe our layout is bad or whatever the case may be. But that's where we're teaching things like the skill of job methods. And then as we do each one of these things, we're going to run into obstacles, okay? And we're not going to reach the goal. And that's where we can use that kind of 4th skill set or the seat of that stool to think about things scientifically and learn that skill of scientific thinking to overcome the obstacles for why we're not reaching our goals, whatever they may be, okay? So it's important to note that really all 4 of these, the 3 legs and the seat to the stool, they still all kind of adhere to the plan, do, check, act methodology that you would have learned about in Lean. We're still going to go to see or go to the source to get the scoop, whatever the GTS stands for you, we're still going to go there, observe, right? Gather all the facts, assess the current situation, create a plan, do the plan, check the plan, and take action based on the plan. Okay. So how do we go about doing that, right? Well, we're going to start, as I think Allison pointed out in the chat, with job instruction, okay? And one of the things about job instruction, Donald De Niro in his TWI case studies book says, if we have standard training, in other words, if we train people the same way how to do a particular task, right, it will lead to standard work. Everybody will be doing it the same way. And as Taiichi Ohno said, there can be no improvements without standard work. If we have the standard work, it, as Donald says here, it leads to improvements, whether those improvements be in quality, productivity, safety, cost, whatever. But having standard training is a necessary prerequisite for having those things that you're looking for out of your process: quality, productivity, safety, cost, whatever those things may be. Now, job instruction consists of kind of 2 4-step methods, right? And one of those, the first 4-step method, if you will, of job instruction is kind of the get ready steps, right? What do we mean by that? Well, how do I create a timetable for training? Who do I train and when do I train them by? All right, what am I training them on, right? That is me breaking down the job, right? I need to figure out what the important steps for that job are, what some of the key points about that job are. And we're going to go over these a little bit more in detail, but then I have to get everything ready. In other words, do I have the proper equipment, the proper tools, the proper materials, whatever it is that is going to aid me in instructing that person on how to do the job, and then arrange the work site so that it's neat and it's in actual working condition, so that when I start that second 4-step method of how to instruct, everything is as it should be. Okay, now prepare the worker. All right, what do we mean by prepare the worker? Well, first thing I want to do is put that person at ease, right? And you can see how that would dovetail with something like job relations, but prepare the worker, state the job, okay? Find out what you may or may not know about the position and the job or the task. Find a way to get you interested in the job or the task. And then I want to place you in the correct position to observe how I'm going to present the operation so that you're able to intake it appropriately. Now I'm going to present the operation, right? Step 2 of the 4-step method there. And I'm going to tell you, and show you uh, one important step about the job at a time. Okay. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you the job instruction breakdown sheet, and you'll see how it kind of mimics the 4-step method here. But then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to show you the job again, where I'm going to re-stress the important steps, but I'm also going to tell you about the key points of each one of those important steps. Then I'm going to do it a third time, where again, I'm going to tell you the important steps, and I'm going to tell you about the key points for each one of those important steps, but I'm going to explain to you the reasons that those things are key points. Okay. And then I'm going to do the job again and add those reasons for the key points. And I'm going to make sure that you understand all of those things, right? What are the important steps? What are the key points? And what are the reasons for the key points? And I think historically, I find, or I see when I go to organizations, that training just consists of you sitting beside me and watching me do it and me telling you how I do it. Bobby and Ricky over there might do something different, right? They're training somebody else a different way. And with that, we're never going to have standards if that's how we're doing our organizational training. If I go out to line number 3 on first shift and Allison trains me this way, but I go back to second shift and Cynthia trains me in a different way, then that's not good. And that's not what we're looking for with job instruction. So the 4th step, though, is follow up, right? I'm going to put the person now on their own. Sorry, I skipped a step. Step 3 is they're going to try out their performance, and they're going to mimic exactly what you just did, right? They're going to do the job, right? If they make an error, you'll correct them, okay? But then they're going to do the job again, where they then repeat the important steps. And they're going to do it a 3rd time, where they then repeat the important steps and the key points. And then they'll do it a 4th time, where they repeat the important steps, the key points, and the reasons for those key points. And then the 4th step is kind of follow up, where we put that person on their own. We designate somebody they can go to for questions, somebody that is already an expert on how to do the job appropriately. We check in on them, frequently, hopefully as we go along, less frequently, and kind of taper that off. Encourage questions, right? Make sure that they know that, hey, no one's going to be an expert on day 1. You're going to have a question, and that's perfectly acceptable. Do not be afraid to ask it. And so that's sort of the job instruction piece of it. That's the skill set that we teach people on site how to do, so that we then create the kind of habits that we'd like to see to have a culture of continuous improvement. A job instruction breakdown sheet, it looks like this, right? Where we're just talking about, here's how you do job operation, whatever. Here's the parts that you need, the tools and the materials or the consumables that you might need to do that task. And then the important step is, right, a logical segment of the operation when something happens to advance the work. All right. Now, when we're talking about key points, what we mean by key points is, does it make or break the job? In other words, if you do not do it like this, we will end up with a faulty product, right? Or does it injure the worker? So if you do not do it this way, you could lose a finger or a hand or whatever the case may be. And then the third thing about a key point is, if you do it like this, it makes the work easier to do. i.e., is there a knack or a trick or some kind of special timing, a bit of special information that helps make the task a little bit easier. All right. Now, you notice that I gave some of the reasons as I explained what the key points were, right? So if I tell someone, hey, as you run this through the bandsaw, make sure that you use this jig to push it through. That's a key point. And the reason is, it's an injure the worker thing. If you do not use this through the table saw, you could lose a finger. All right. Another example might be, when you're packaging these things, you have to package them in this size, because that's when it goes through the machine that actually does the wrapping, or whatever the case may be. And if it's not within this size, the wrapping will mess up. That's the reason for that key point. And so that's how those things work. All right. And now this is an example of a job instruction kind of timetable. Who are we training? What are we training them on? What are the jobs, etc. Okay. So moving on to job relations, this is where we're kind of teaching the skill set. We're teaching people how to build positive employee relations. And we do so that we can increase cooperation and motivation, right? How do we accomplish work? How do we accomplish outcomes through others? How do we um, prevent problems from happening before they happen? And then what it really does is kind of gives us a standard method, right? Again, a habit to deal with personnel issues or outcome issues related to personnel. All right. So how do we go about doing that? Well, job relations kind of works, just everything here's 4 steps, right? 4 steps seems to be the where it's at. But the foundations for good relations are let each worker know how he or she is getting along, right? Um, give credit where credit's due. Sometimes that's feedback about how to do something better. That's also telling them how to get along. So in other words, think about this. If I don't know what you expect of me, okay, then I don't know what I should or shouldn't be accomplishing. If I'm not meeting the metric, part of that first step of telling someone how he or she is getting along is, hey, here's some feedback on ways to improve your output, right? Now, what if I'm doing a fantastic job? Well, part of job relations is you need to let that person know they're doing a fantastic job. But it doesn't do any good to tell me 6 months after I've done the fantastic thing. You kind of got to strike while the iron's hot. If I did a great job yesterday or this morning, tell me at lunch or tell me the very next workday. Um, you want to tell people in advance about changes that are going to affect them. Now, oftentimes we do that, but we miss a key aspect of this. Why are we changing? Right? If we don't tell people why we're doing things, then they're just never going to accept it, right? And telling them why and working with them to accept the change is a piece of this, telling them in advance. And then last 4 step here is make best use of each person's ability. Okay. Now that sounds an awful lot like one of the 8 wastes, which is employee underutilization. And it is. So I want to look for abilities that people aren't currently using that I know that they have. All right. I'd never want to stand in a person's way of excellence because I have to have them stick to whatever it is, dictate whatever it is I think they should or should not be capable of. All right. So the 4-step method for that is to get the facts. Okay. Weigh and decide, take action, and then check the results. Now, by get the facts, what we mean is let's review the record. Let's find out, are there any rules or policies or customs that apply here? Let me talk to all the individuals concerned. Let me get their opinions, their feelings. I want to make sure that I have the whole story, not his story, not her story, but the whole story. Okay. And then the second thing I'm going to do as a leader is I'm going to try to fit those facts together. And I'm going to consider the bearings that they have on each other. What possible actions are there for me to take? Because there's never just one possible action to take. There's always multiple possibilities that I can do, and some may be better than others. And I want to make sure that I take the most appropriate action. So in doing so, I want to check any policies and procedures and make sure that whatever I'm doing falls within company guidelines or state and federal regulations, as the case may be. And then I want to lastly kind of consider the objective, right? What is it I'm trying to accomplish? All right. Now, what effect is that going to have on the individual? What effect is that going to have on production, right? Because all of those are important factors before I make a decision. All right. But I want to make sure, most importantly, that I'm not just jumping to conclusions, which we too typically tend to do. All right. Now, the third step is I'm going to take action, right? And when I do that, I'm going to consider things like, am I going to handle this myself? All right. Maybe I can just do it. Or maybe it rises above a level of me that I need some help in handling this. And I need to maybe refer it to my supervisor, right? But I also want to make sure that I watch the timing of any action that I take. I can't punish someone or I can't reward someone for good or bad behavior, whichever the case may be, long after the behavior has been recorded, right? Because then it has no merit, it has no bearing, and it has no meaning. But I also want to make sure that I don't just pass the buck. That just because it's hard, that I don't just say, "Hey, someone else do this. I'm not going to do it." So there's that. All right, and then the fourth step of this is kind of check the results, right? How soon? How did it work? How soon am I going to follow up? How often do I need to continue checking the results? I need to watch for changes in outputs, the work output. I need to watch for changes in attitude from that particular employee. What is the relationship now like between me and that employee, or between that employee and their coworkers? All of these things are things that I'm going to be checking. But if you'll notice, I'll just back up one slide. Again, kind of get the facts, weigh, and decide. Well, that's plan, right? Take action is do, and then check the results is obviously check. And that's going to dictate the next action that I need to take with this particular job relation. All right. Now, the third skill set, is job methods. And, when we say job methods, we're talking about a practical plan that's going to help you produce greater quantities of a quality product in less time, by making the most use, or the best use, of our manpower, our machines, and our materials. And again, that's one of those kind of fishbone 6M concepts there, right? Manpower, machines, materials. And it's a skill that helps supervisors, and not only supervisors, but workers, kind of to break down the work in small parts and small details, smaller than the job instruction breakdown sheet. Job instruction is important steps, right? The big things. But when we're talking about improving methods, we're getting a little more granular sometimes. How do we break it down into small parts, and how do we improve it? And when we improve it, we're thinking about things like, what can we eliminate from the process? What is this waste? All right. What can we combine? Because these things really go together. How can we rearrange the flow, if you will? And sometimes combining creates better flow. So it's, again, falls into kind of the lean concepts, but we're teaching it through a much more basic skill set, okay, of job methods. How do we utilize our workforce or machines that we may have, or materials, more effectively? And then we're going to document that new method, the cost savings, the benefits, whatever the case may be, so that when we present this change to management, that they can quickly accept or reject this particular change. Right now, again, a 4-step method, just like anything else, right? Break down the job. All right. Question every detail. Why do we do this? That's the one question that, when I go on site with clients, sometimes I always ask, why? And they tend to get frustrated sometimes on day one, but it's an important question. Why are we even doing it this way? All right. What are we doing? Where are we doing it? When do we do it? Who should be doing it? How should they be doing it? Right. And then we develop a new method by, again, what can we eliminate? What can we combine? What can we rearrange? What can we simplify? And then apply that new method by selling it to the boss or to the operators, get final approval, and then put the method to work. But last, and certainly not least, and maybe even most important, is give credit where credit's due to the people who come up with the new process. That's always a key factor in making sure that we not only have success, but that we have sustainment and long-term sustainment. And again, it kind of ties into that kind of job relations piece as well. All right. So here's a breakdown sheet, and you can see that it's much more granular than the other. Every detail, every inspection, every delay, so on and so forth. What is it that we're actually doing on a granular level to complete this particular process? And then, we're looking at here's the improvement proposal sheet. And, here are proposed improvements to the operation from above. But I think it's always key to note that we need to explain exactly how we got to this improvement, exactly how we made this improvement. Attach, proposed breakdown sheets, diagrams, anything that's a related item that is going to help our management make the decision about whether or not we should or should not make this change. Okay. And then the seat to the stool, if you will, is, the improvement kata. And there's 4 steps, right? Understand the direction or challenge. In other words, who do we want to be and where do we want to go, right? When we see ourselves long term, 3 to 5 years down the road, whatever it is, what is it that how would we like to see ourselves operating as an organization? What do we want to be known as? All right, now we need to figure out where we are in relation to where we'd like to be. So grasp the current condition. Now, it's pretty self-evident that we're not going to go from where we are to where we'd like to be long-term down the road. So we need to establish an iterative step, a target condition on the way to meeting our challenge. And then we're going to use the plan, do, check, act methodology to kind of experiment our way towards that particular target condition. All right. So as we experiment towards that target condition, what are we talking about? Well, there are obstacles that stand in our way. There are things that impede us from being who we like to be or getting where we'd like to go. Sometimes those things are the 8 wastes from lean, right? Sometimes they're not. But what we need to do is figure out what it is that's stopping us from being who we want to be or where we want to go. And then we want to kind of systematically and scientifically attack those obstacles, but we want to attack those obstacles one at a time, right? We don't want to touch too many variables because we want to make sure that we have a full grasp of our current condition and understand, if I change this thing, what effect does it have on the process? If I change too many things at once, which I tend to find in Kaizen events, I'm not real sure what the effect of each one of the changes that we've made had on the overall value stream, because we didn't test things at a small enough level. All right. And I think the improvement kata really focuses in on that piece of, which one thing are we trying to fix? And then when I say systematically and scientifically, what we're saying is, what is our next step? Right. And by step, what I really mean is, what's my experiment? What's my hypothesis for how to overcome that obstacle? And not only that, what do I think is going to happen when I apply this new, whatever it is I'm doing to overcome this obstacle? Okay. Because that's important. If I don't know, then I don't fully understand or grasp my current condition. Right. So I need to go back a step and understand my current condition a little better, because I should be able to predict, if I apply this stimulus, this is the outcome that should happen. And then the 4th step is, great, how quickly can we go and do it? Because, with the improvement kata, and when we're thinking scientifically, what we're really talking about is the more times I can experiment, the faster I can learn, and the faster I can learn, the faster I can change. So I tend to find it's a much simpler, a much more elegant and quicker skill set to get to where we'd like to be long term. All right. Now, I also think it's very important to note the kind of similarities between job relations and the improvement kata. Because with job relations, what we're doing is we're really sitting down with the person, right? We're getting the facts, we're weighing and deciding what to do, we're taking action, and then we're checking the results. And that's no different than what we're doing with the scientific kind of problem-solving skill set that we're trying to teach through the improvement kata. We're doing it with a supervisor. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but with job relations, right? We're having that conversation with the employee, whether it be about production or cost or whatever, but we're having that kind of conversation where we're following almost the plan, do, check, act methodology. And then with kata, we're doing the same thing. We call it in kata, we call it a coach, but it's typically tends to be that supervisor subordinate role that where this conversation is happening. And we're saying, hey, we're having that coaching session of, hey, what are you trying to accomplish, right? What is your, remind me what the challenge is again. The next question I ask is, what is your target condition, right? And then I ask you kind of, what is your actual condition now? What obstacles are impeding you from reaching that target condition? What's your next experiment, and what do you think, or what do you expect to happen? How quickly can we go test that theory, right? And we want to do it with rapidity. I want to have that conversation in the morning. I want you to test it in the afternoon, and I want to have a follow-up conversation that afternoon, kind of deal, so that we can get better much quicker. All right. Now, the 4 steps of the improvement kata, and I want to just give a shout out. These are Mike Rother, who wrote the Toyota Kata book. These are his illustrations. So I borrowed those from him. So thank you, Mike, for that. But they're presented in 2 different ways, right? One just kind of gives you understand the direction and challenge, right? So what's your compass? What's your true north, if you will? What's your current situation or current condition? And do you fully understand it? And I find when I'm teaching this from a scientific thinking standpoint, I spend the largest majority of my time right there, because people want to, again, we don't want to jump to conclusions, right? That's what we said about job relations. And I think even in lean, people want to just jump to, this is what we need to do. Let's go do it. But they don't fully understand what their current condition is. And they don't have a true prediction about what that thing they want to just go and do is going to have on their process. So I spend the largest majority of our time kind of really making sure we fully grasp our current condition. And when we do fully grasp it, we're able to establish a realistic and effective next target condition. And then we want to plan, do, check, act our way, right? We want to iterate towards the target condition. Now, if you look at that illustration, the one with the blocks, right? It looks like somebody kind of rolling a stone up the hill, okay? And that's really what we're doing. And I find that too often when we use some of the other methodologies, that stone, much like Sisyphus, tends to just roll right back down, and 6 months later we're exactly where we started from, and we need another Kaizen event, right? And that's why I think this is a much more elegant and a much more simple methodology or skill set, the underlying skill set about how to problem solve, so that we do see everyday continuous improvement. Now, you notice the illustration on the right, or the right bottom, is presented in a slightly different way, where, the first circle is way over there. It's like the thing that we're trying to reach off in the distance. All right. And the second circle is way down here where we're at. You are here, right? Grasp the current condition. Step number 2. And then step number 3 is that kind of iterative step between where we'd like to be and where we are. And then the 4th step, that iterate towards the target condition, are those experiments that we're conducting to get there today. Not we'll apply this next week, when we're done with our Kaizen, but let's go do it right now. Let's see what happens. Let's go learn from our hypothesis right now. And you'll also notice that line in between where we are in our iterative step or our next target condition, boy, it's not a straight line. I mean, there's going to be improvement. There's going to be backslides. There's going to be all kinds of things. And that's what it's all about. Learning so that we can be the best that we can be over time. Okay. Now, how do we implement this? That's always the hard part, right? And well, I think when you understand that it's really just 4 skill sets that we're trying to teach, okay? The skill of how to instruct, right? And when we are, when someone doesn't understand how to do the job, the skill of job instruction, right? When somebody won't do the job, then we're talking about the skill of job relations. When the job's too hard, we're talking about the skill of job methods. And then when there's problems that arise in any of the 3 or outside of the 3, then we want to teach that kind of skill of scientific thinking. And all of it really still falls within that plan, do, check, act wheelhouse. Okay. So if I kind of have this Venn diagram here of, well, what is it we're trying to do? And why are we trying to do that? Right. And well, how do we do that? Right. And do our people even want to do that? Well, one of those things, are skills, one of those things about attitude and desire, but interloped between or interconnected between all of those things is, have we built the right habits? And when we build the right habits, we have the right behavior, which then leads to the right mindset, which then kind of creates the culture, that piece that we're looking for, right? We have that culture of continuous improvement because we've created the right mindset, the right skill sets, and the right habits over time. So I think in order to really do it and do it effectively, you got to have support and participation from some of your top management people. Okay. And I think it's important for them to identify kind of that challenge, right? That outcome metric, the goal that we'd like to reach in the future. Uh, Understanding the direction or challenge, they have to identify that for us. Okay. And then I think they have to identify someone maybe at the next level or at their level who then serves the role of that training within the industry and kata champion for the organization. And then we have to get uh, the supervisors who would be the coach or the supervisor for job relations. We have to get their participation. And then we have to get their ownership for those kind of sub-level metrics, the target conditions that we're trying to reach that will lead to the challenge, right? And then we have to make sure that we report on those metrics and recognize them over time. And I think if we're able to do all of that and kind of create that three-legged stool with the seed of scientific thinking, I think over time, what happens is our people have as Oscar said up front, right? A collective set of behaviors over time on the job site, right? And so that is what our culture is. And that's what we will have instilled the right skill sets, the right behaviors over time. And I think that will get us to the kind of culture that we're looking for continuous improvement. And that's exactly 23 minutes on the dot to allow for about 15 minutes of Q&A. Thank you guys so much for sitting and listening. My contact information is here. Feel free to call, text, email, whatever you'd like. Know that the complexity of the question that you ask me needs to be reflected in the medium in which you ask it. So don't ask me a complex question on text because you'll get a simple answer to a complex question. But if you email me or call me, I'm happy to have any kind of discussion that you'd like about any of the materials presented today. And I guess, Susan, at this time, if you just want to take questions in the chat or just open it up the conversation, I don't know how you want to do that, but I'm going to leave it totally up to you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, folks,
Yeah.
if you have any questions, we'd appreciate if you'd use the Q&A, or you can use the chat as well. If you'd like to ask it in person, just let me know. You can raise your hand or send me a chat and I can unmute you. And Chris, thank you. It was a great presentation as always.
Well, thank you.
And we will be sending out a copy of the recording that should be in the next day or two. It will come from the IES Zoom user. So if you don't see it, you might want to check your spam to make sure it's not in that folder. But again, we have a few minutes for questions if anyone has one for Chris.
That must mean I did a fantastic job. I explained it so thoroughly that no questions exist. I know that not to be the truth, so I welcome questions.
Right, Chris, I'm not seeing any questions. So
well, fantastic.
All right. Well, we again appreciate you taking the time to present to us today, and we thank all of our attendees for being a part of it. And let's see. Oh, we did have a question come in. And the question is, what industries are applying this?
Well, the answer is yes, right? I have seen this done everywhere. So, originally, I really think that, obviously the training within industry was born out of manufacturing, as I said, in the war effort. But I see healthcare, hospitals, I've seen HR groups or HR organizations within various industries utilizing this. I've seen government agencies utilizing kata and job instruction. So I don't think there's a specific industry segment that this applies to. I think it's universal. In fact, I've used the job instruction breakdown sheet and four-step method to train my son when he was in high school how to change the oil in his car. So I think it applies to everything. Yep. Doesn't matter if we're making widgets, treating patients, or baking chocolate chip cookies. If there's a process, it'll help.
We thank you very much then, and we'll hope to see you at a future webinar. Our next one is on practical project management, scheduled for October the 11th. So we do hope to see you there. I agree. Comment, great presentation, Chris. Thank you. I second that.
Thank you, Wendy.
So I hope everyone has a wonderful day, good rest of the week, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.